Okay, so now we have the sleeve cut out. This is the top part of the sleeve that fits to the robe armhole, and this is the bottom half, shortened enough to put a band on. And this is the underarm seam, and it's folded here. We'll fold them, we'll cut 2 of them on the fold so that we have a left and right sleeve. Now I want to show you how to make the bands first. I forgot about the bands in the last portion of this video, but we need to make a sleeve band and a band to go around the opening of the robe and then the tie. So we'll do the bands first, and we're going to start with this band. Very simple. We're just going to take a piece of paper, just a scrap left over from what I've been working on, and I'm going to fold it in half. Now I want my band to finish 2 inches, but I want it folded so that it's going to be a folded band, so it's as pretty on the inside as it is on the outside. So the first thing I'm going to do from this folded edge is draw a 2-inch line. So 2 inches will go here, and I'm going to fold it again. So I'm going to fold it over like this, and I want to make this fold line up with the folded line on my sleeve. See? And this point right here now becomes the seam for my band. Right there. Now that's a seam line. That's not the seam allowance, but the actual seam line. I'm going to simply add a 1/2 inch on here, and I'm going to cut this out. Now, before we cut it out though, we've got to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance across the top as well, so that we can sew it back to our sleeve opening. So we have a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the underarm seam and a 1/2 inch seam allowance to go along the top edge of our cuff or our sleeve. Just like this, see? Band is on here. This is the seam line that sews to the sleeve, and this is the underarm seam. Note what happens here, and this is very clever. Before we had kind of an angle here, but with the band, now we're going to have a nice, clean, square finish. So the band really makes this sleeve have a nice finesse. And you just cut through the layers, and when you open it up, you have the perfect band. You label it, and then we'll move on to the band that goes around the front of our robe. So we're going to just cut it right here. Now if it moves on you a little bit, you might want to tape it. See, I've got a little bit of a schism there, so I'm just going to clean that up. But you might want to tape it if you have issues with your paper getting out of the way. And it looks like I've got a little clip corner here. This too is easy to fix. You just put a little piece of paper under here, tape it down. It's nice to use your scraps. That way you're being saving. And now I just fold it over, and I'll just trim this extra paper off to match the other side. Just like this. Now I'm going to mark this. This is my sleeve band. So I'm going to put on it what it is so I don't forget. It's my sleeve band. And I'm going to cut 2 of these. Always put how many you're going to cut so you don't make a mistake and not cut enough or too many. So now let's move on, and I'll show you how to do the front band that goes around the neckline and down the front, and the ties. So now we're ready to do the front band that goes up front and around the back neck. And I've got the front robe laying here, and the back neck is right here underneath the front robe. So the first thing we're going to do is take a measurement. So I'm going to measure the entire front here, and you can use a tape measure or a flexible ruler. And I'm only measuring the seam line, not the seam allowance. So I'm going to go from the seam line point right into my shoulder, and I'm going to measure off the seam line all the way through the base of the hemline. So this is 35 inches, and I like to just write it right along the line in small letters so that, or numbers, so that I always have that measurement in case I ever need to refer to it again. So the front area is 35 inches. Now we're going to measure the back neck, which is right here, the seam line only. So I'm going to take my tape measure, and I'm just going to go around through here, moving my tape measure so I stay right on the curved line. And this measurement is coming out 4 3/8. So I'm going to write that right there. So my entire band needs to finish 35 plus 4 3/8, which is 39 3/8. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by taking a scrap of paper and folding it in half. See? Making sure I've got enough here to allow for 2.5 inches so that I can make my entire band. And then I'm going to take my long ruler and I'm going to measure 39 3/8 inches on this piece of paper. So let me get my long ruler here. And because this ruler is 2 inches wide, which makes it very handy, I'm going to go ahead and book the edge of my ruler to my folded paper and draw a line 39 3/8 inch long. I'm going to start with a square line at the top and just basically trace my ruler. This is going to give me my 2-inch band. I don't have seam allowance yet, but I will shortly. So we need to move it up on my table just a little bit here to get my 39 3/8. So right here is 39 3/8. I take my see-through ruler and I'll square off. Now this is a very long band with a seam and the center back neck. That's where the center back neck's going to be. So this is my band. Now it's very critical that I have a notch to lines up with my shoulder seam. So 4 3/8 down from center back neck, I'm going to come down at 4 3/8 and I'm going to put a little notch there. That way I know when I'm sewing this on the center back neck that I'm aligning in the right place to finish off the front of my robe. Now I can go ahead and put my seam allowance on, which is a 1/2 inch all the way around. And go all the way down through here. I don't need any seam allowance on the bottom because it's already long enough to be incorporated into my hem. Now it's actually a little longer than I need because I'll probably clean finish this, but I like to have the extra just in case I need it because it's got the whole hem in there. May not need it all, but I like to have it just in case. I'm going to bring my notch out to my edge of my seam allowance, and the last thing I want to do is add another notch because this is a very long stretch here and I don't want to get it distorted. So I'm going to come down roughly right in the middle of my curve here, and I'm going to put another notch on the front of my robe. And then I just want to walk this out, lining up my seam line now, not the seam edge. And I'm going to transfer that notch right here over to my band. This way, I have 2 notches to place my band on so I don't get it crooked. Simply cut it out, and this is my front band. I'm going to cut 2 of these. So front band, cut 2, and that's my band. So let's go on and I'm going to talk to you about making the tie. So we're almost done with our robe. All we need now is our tie belt and our little spaghetti tie to go inside the robe and our carriers. So the first thing we're going to do is our tie belt, and we want the tie belt to finish, I want my tie belt in other words to finish 1.5 inches, which means I'm going to cut it 4 inches. That will include the seam allowances and everything. Now how do I calculate how long I want my tie to be? You want to take your full total waistband and divide that in half, so that will be 15 for me with a 30-inch waist. And then I'm going to add on at least 20 more inches to make the tie, the bow, and the extension from the bow. So you need a minimum of 20 more inches. I'm going to pad that a little bit. I think I'm going to make my tie area 24. So if I've got 15 plus 24, that's going to end up being a 39-inch strip for my waist, plus 1 inch for seam allowance, center back, and a 1/2 inch on the very end. So total I'm going to have a 40-inch tie belt by 4 inches wide. So here we go. We're going to make this. This is half of my belt. So truly my whole entire belt is going to be 80 inches. But we're going to make it in 2 pieces because otherwise it's so long you'll never find a piece of fabric that long, and it will cost you a lot of money and yardage to make it all in 1 piece. And the third reason not to do it, it's very difficult to sew all in 1 piece. So we're going to make it 40 inches by 4 inches. That's going to be our belt tie. And remembering that my ruler is already 2 inches wide. I'm going to use that to my advantage. So I'm going to square off at the top here and put just a little mark where that 2 inches is. And I'm going to come all the way down until I hit the 40-inch mark and square off there. And then I'm going to put a little mark right there as well, because I can slide my ruler over and line up with these 2 marks and then draw the other side of my tie. So I'm going to have a 4-inch wide tie and 40 inches long. And after I mark my 40 inches, I'm going to take my smaller ruler and draw the end off. It's that simple. So this is my tie. So I'm just going to put robe tie. And I'm going to put cut 2. So I remember I need 2 of them. So that's it. That's the robe tie. Now let's talk about the little spaghetti tie that goes inside the robe. That's the part that hooks to the left front and the right side seam. So it keeps the robe from hanging and keeps it in place. You want at least 20 to 25 inches for this little piece, and it's spaghetti. So it's only going to be 1.5 inches wide. That way you can make a 3/8 inch spaghetti. And I'm just going to book it right to the edge of my original robe tie. That way I can just draw it and cut it one time and save the cut. Now this ruler is 24 inches long, so I'm just going to pop it down another inch, just like this. And that's cut 2. That'll be my inside ties, my spaghetti ties. Now, we also need carriers for our robe belt. And those are 3 inches each. So I'm going to make another section that will be the same width as my spaghetti ties and 6 inches long. So these are the carriers. So I'm going to just write carriers here. This will be cut in 2, but I'll cut 1 of this, and then I'll just shorten it to 3 inches each to make both carriers. So that's my carriers. This is my spaghetti tie. Now both of these pieces need to be on the bias. So you want to make sure, I'm going to cut 2 of these, that you put a bias line on these. Now how to do that is, if you have a see-through ruler, you take one of the blocks and you take 2 of the corners and you book the 2 corners to the straight edge. And that's going to give you your bias line. And I'm just going to make a note here, cut on bias. If you don't, you're going to have a very difficult time turning your spaghetti. And that goes for the carriers too. So take the block, take the 2 corners, book it to my line, and draw in my grain line. So these have to be cut on the bias, these 2 pieces right here. Now, if you want to, instead of cutting a separate line here, you could cut the entire thing and then just cut off what you need for your carriers and have the rest for your spaghetti. It's up to you. You can do that as well. So we're going to cut all of this out and put it with the rest of our robe pattern, which is right here. And now we have a lovely kimono robe pattern, and I just can't wait to make it up. I'm going to make it out of satin. I have some remnants, and I plan to do a color block robe out of satin so that when I get out of the bubble bath, I have something luxurious to put on and feel like a queen. So I hope you enjoy your robe, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe and like at the bottom of the video.